Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dotson, and I'm the founder and program coordinator for Highland Park Poetry, as well as your host for Poetry Today. I'm real excited to have Bill Lederer with me today. Bill went as far as sophomore year, Notre Dame, served 2 years in the Army, returned to the U.S., married his high school sweetheart, wrote plays and poems through pre-med and 2 years of Marquette Med School, and throughout the next 50 years as executive director of the American Hearing Research Foundation until today. And we're really pleased to have him because, well, most recently, Bill was awarded the first place for an adult non-resident in Highland Park Poetry's 2019 Poetry Challenge. Bill responded to the Poetry Challenge for the TriCube. The TriCube is a poetic form developed by Philip Lederer. And like its name suggests, it's got 3 verses. Each verse is composed of 3 lines, and each line only contains 3 syllables. So it's a very compact, spare form. And Bill nailed it, according to the judges, and with his poem called The Technique. So Bill, why don't you take it away, and you can thrill us with your winning poem.
Yeah, this is actually the first tri-cube poem that I've ever written, and I found it an intriguing form. It has all of the strength and economy that you find in haikus, and then you got to do some other things to it. I find it lends to what I do, and that's to have many levels. But let me just read you the poem here. The technique. Who taught her to be like a goddess? Her design is as strong as it gives. Her web traps others in its wonder.
Well, it was great. So it's a spider.
Right.
Arachne is that the
Sure, that's one of the goddesses of the Greek culture.
Right.
But it fascinates me. Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre was asked once, towards the end of his life, if he had his life to do over, what would he spend more time concentrating on? And he said, the given, things that just come to you without any rational rhyme nor reason. And I find that if you see a web, if you've seen any of these webs, they're like a perfect design, and they have quadrants that makes it very easy for the spider to go from one quadrant to the other, but not his prey. His prey gets tangled up and gets eaten eventually. So the spider gets even bigger animals than itself and is yet able to master it. The animal starves or whatever, and the spider then attacks. So it's interesting. But these webs are so strong. They use them as in the Second World War. They used them as what is it when you have you aim a target? The crosshair.
Oh, the crosshairs. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they have all these attributes, and so how does this design end up, in the universe, in this pea brain or even smaller than a pea, of a spider?
Right.
It isn't taught. No, nobody taught that spider what to do, and yet it's such a magical accomplishment.
Yeah, well, you captured it very well in a very few words and few lines.
Yeah.
So it's very compact.
And of course, women have been called spiders and all that, how they trap their men and all that by design. But I meant it another way too. Design, that there's something magnificent in the universe. There is design, and whence it comes, who knows?
Okay. Well, I mean, you mentioned that this was the first time you'd ever tried a tricube before.
Right.
So what types of poems, are there particular forms or poems that you generally like to
No,
work with?
you know, I fool around with all forms.
Okay.
And, you know, I've written everything under the sun, and I don't find any favorite poem form, but I do feel this. I'm free verse. I've written free verse too, and love it. After I've done enough of the very compact forms, but I find that you know, Freud had a statement. He said the royal road to the unconscious is the dream world. Well, I think for a poet, the royal road to his unconscious, where he comes up and surprises you with something maybe he didn't even know, is rhyme, meter, alliteration, assonance. So all these things, a rhythm, he captures and surprises himself in his poetry many times as he writes it. I think there's some good evidence. There's a wonderful book by a fellow by the name of Miston. It's called The Singing Neanderthal. And his, yeah, now, you know, this seems very esoteric and all that, but it sort of makes sense. He says, you know, possibly 500,000 years before man appeared on the scene, Neanderthal was around, and they spoke, and we don't know this, of course, but they spoke in a sing-songy language. You know, in fact, this is what you find in some Aboriginal tribes. There's a sing-songy quality about it, about their language, and we truncate our language. Modern man truncates it, and I think you have to sort of return to that rhythmic part of poetry.
And I guess one of the things that most fascinates me about you is the work that you have been doing, because I know we talked about it years ago when we first met. Bill teaches creative writing at Stateville Correctional Center, which is a maximum security prison 20 miles north of Joliet, Illinois. He began visiting a poetry class there, but led by the program's founder, Margaret Burroughs, and that was over 42 years ago. When Margaret passed away about 8 years ago, Bill took on the mantle of being the leader of the program. Can you talk about what that program is?
Yeah. Well, first I'll tell you a little bit about Margaret Burroughs. She founded, with her husband, the first African historical museum. It's located in DuSable High School, near DuSable. So she's very well known. She was a poet and a sculptor, the whole works. So she's an amazing person, and I was involved with a non-denominational retreat group that would go into the prisons, and we'd give lectures. And she heard that I was a playwright at the time, and she asked me if I'd like to visit her class, and I got hooked. Because what I saw is the human potential. Of course, they have a lot to write about at Stateville. These fellows have done some terrible things, but you never give up on anybody. They come out. They have gotten to the bottom, and in fact, I wrote a line that I think captures what I think is why they have great insights, and the line was this: I felt like I was either going to flip or find myself. And I think they go so deep because under such stress, that they find something there that's enduring. And I also think of Shakespeare's famous line, and I never can quote poets exactly, but we'll give it a try here. He said, "Adversity is like the toad. While it looks ugly and venomous, it wears a jewel at the center of its forehead. These fellows do gain something through their tragic life." It's amazing, really.
So how does the program, though, work?
Well,
How frequently do you visit, and do you have a class?
Yes, on
Okay.
Tuesdays, and it's 1 hour. I wish it used to be 2, and they've cut us now to a shorter time. But they're called 9 to 10, and I start. There's 14 to a class. They don't allow a larger group. Mm-hmm. And there's a 10-year waiting list.
Oh, heavens.
Because, everybody wants to get in. I have no restrictions. They just have to tell me that they are interested in poetry. And I'll ask them, if you've never read poetry, what songs do you like? And I can sort of tell who have the instincts for the poetry. Okay. And, they're wonderful. I've learned so much from them. If I could I read one of their poems?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I'll give you an example on this and how they wrote it. It was it's called My Time. And this was written a couple years ago. What a fellow did is he went up to the blackboard and he said, I'm going to write a couple lines here, see what you think. And he wrote 2 lines. And then before anybody could respond, he threw the chalk at the class. And one of the fellows in the class caught it, and he says, you write the next 2 lines. So another fellow gets up. And it went like that through the class. And here's what they came up with. They're writing, let me explain their condition. They live in cages, okay? They call them cells. They're 9 by 5, and they have 1 toilet. The seat, when lowered, serves as a sink. And then there's 2 to a cell. So you can imagine how cramped it is. So anyway, what do they do for exercise? This will be in the poem, and I'll read it. I walk, jog, I run, inside moving, yet standing still, stagnated, but growing, have so much, however never enough, lost and never to return. Where do I go when I just don't know? How do I relight the flame when it's cold? Why do I dream when my thoughts mean nothing? How do I learn control unless I meet myself walking in the path of righteousness? My progress is valued even if I'm the only one grading. My ending is my beginning, so I trust. Now what you get there, of course, is 2 lines of pessimism, 2 lines of optimism, and it's this play of back and forth. They all bring their content to the poem. What is amazing is the last lines rings like what T.S. Eliot said in Proof Rock. He said something, my ending is my beginning. And, but my fellows, my brothers added, so I trust. And I'm sure T.S. Eliot would be proud of that. So there's something in the collective unconscious. These fellows never read T.S. Eliot, and yet they came up with the same line. So it amazes me. They're an extraordinary group.
And is that something that you do? Now it seems like in this description you were talking about how one person started the poem, wrote 2 lines, and then passed on the chalk to another.
Have I done that with others? No. No.
So what do you
mostly it's this one person writes the poem.
Okay.
But in this case, the class did.
Okay.
But it's interesting too. It was sort of, sometimes there's a collective unconscious going,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the line of who was it? It slips my mind about the yes. Yeats said, "An argument with the world is rhetoric. An argument with yourself is poetry." So you're digging deeper than just rhetoric, and that's what these guys do.
Okay. So do you share examples of poetry or with them?
Yeah.
Or okay. So.
Yeah. Well, we touch on everything from all nations, Rilke, Paseo, you name it, and they, Shakespeare, moderns, Ginsberg, everyone. But I want them to write poetry. Mm-hmm. So what it is, they bring their poems to class, and see, they have plenty of time to think. So,
sure.
It's sort of an ideal situation for poetry, at least. So they bring their poem to class, they read it, one guy reads it, and then there's comments. And it's a loving exchange. And the one thing they'll know if a fellow is not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay.
And they'll be hard on him. But there's a love there, and they respect each other. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience.
You've said that you've been doing this for 42 years.
Off and on up till the last 8 years.
Okay.
Then she did, the same time I did retreats there at Stateville. But then and that was 5-6 times a year. But then full time for 8 years now.
Okay. And since you've been there, have you seen progress with the writers who are participating?
Oh, yes. The only regret is that it's hard to keep it going. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to get something organized so that after they can only take my class for a semester, for 6 months, and then they have to move on because there's so many waiting for it.
Sure.
But then they move.
But
then they move into into prose. And my friend, he's retired. He was a philosophy professor at Loyola University, Andrew McKenna, a genuine philosopher, and he introduces them to everybody from Dostoevsky to Conrad, all of the great novelists. So they come out of my class, and poems are shorter, okay?
Sure.
But when they hit the larger prose, it's more effort of concentration, and they get it, and they move on. And then we have a newsletter, not a newsletter, actually, it's a volume of poetry, and they submit, after we do the editing, they submit it to this magazine, and that magazine is passed throughout the country to the various prisoners. And I'll give you an example how heartrending it is. The one poem, if I can find it here. What is it here? Here it is. Here's an example. And these guys have lived this. It's called Shame. She walks the streets, jumping in and out of cars. She doesn't care who sees her or what they think on the outside. She costs the price of a hot dog, but when she is done, she breaks down. It's one of those days that life and shame have imposed their evil upon her. She breaks down and cries. Now, that's his sister, okay? So that's quite moving.
Yeah. How has has the involvement in this program impacted you in your writing?
Yeah, it's made me more open. I tend to be abstract, and it's made me more concrete, and it's just the give and take. You learn so much from your fellow poets, as you know. That's just how it works. It's an amazing way of learning about the world. I was thinking, where I end that one poem about her web traps others in its wonder. I was thinking, how do we start learning? I think the first thing is through imitation. The baby imitates the mother's smile. Maybe there's some kind of mirror genes that they have, all that. Some of those theories are there. But also wonder when you stand in front of something, not knowing all of what it is, but you stand and wonder. And with that in mind, I'll read a poem that I think touches on it. And it's called Us. And what I've been satisfied, science is hot, and it should be. So much is being discovered. But that's out there. And I think we should also praise what's in here. So one of the great mysteries is, what is consciousness? I mean, you can have all of the neuroscientists in the world telling us what it is, but it's mysterious. And if we're not humble enough to know that, get another occupation. But anyway, here's what it is. It's called Us. Consciousness, outstripping all the stars, beats light round the corner, smiles and waits. Meantime, feel the flashes and echoes. When you think of it, you hear about the expanding universe, all those stars and all that, but we have been told about that, and we believe it, and it's amazing. We're confronted with wonder, but, we can absorb that. We don't understand it completely, but it's amazing. The human mind is amazing. What triggered me into this was Plato has a line where he says the difference between God and man is that, or the gods and man is, the gods can want to be, say, in an island, and they're there. Their thought puts them there. But we humans have this body that keeps us from jumping it. So the mind, consciousness, in a way, is godlike. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So anyway, the thing that I think is that you can hear all of this stuff about the stars going out and all that, but you can sort of be ahead of it. You can say that, okay, there's a trillion stars, but in my mathematical world, I can add one more number, or 10 more numbers, or trillion more numbers. So the mind is something very powerful. Kurt Vonnegut came up with a thought. He says, just think of it. I can go from one galaxy to another in a blink of the eye. And what he meant, the imagination. You can do that. So that should be rediscovered with us. Praise science, wonderful, but also the internal man and woman.
Yes, I was assuming you were speaking in the general sense.
But here's an interesting line, because it's what poetry does. I knew, that I beat light around the corner, smiles and waits, sort of Buddha-like, at the end of the road, the Buddha. I remember a philosopher, theologian said to me, after all that's said and done and all of the physicists give us their theories, they'll see some of these medieval philosophers twiddling their thumbs. They have been there already. So anyway, there's that thing of smiles and waits. So it beats light itself, the human thought. But what happened, and this is the beauty of poetry, and by the way, this is a trichome.
Yes.
And
yeah,
it forced me to add something that I thought, where am I going to go with this poem? I thought I said it all here. But no, I said, I was not into the world of feelings. And so I said, say here, meantime, feel the flashes and echoes. Where did I get that thought? It just came to me. But I'm thinking, look at babies in the womb have all the equipment to hear and even see, but it's probably blurred there or whatever, but they have all that, and they can hear and all that. So here, meantime, feel the flashes. Insights come at us like flashes.
Ah, okay,
Development comes to us like flashes and echoes. And what I was thinking about after I wrote those lines, one of the fascinating things as a kid I remember about nature is seeing the lightning crackle and then hearing it.
Wow, yeah, right.
3 or 4 beats later.
Right.
And I got that connection, but didn't know really anything about science or anything like that. But it was mysterious. It was mysterious. And I think that's how we learn. Those mysteries, internal and external.
Well, we may have enough time for one more short poem if you've got one that you wanted to share.
Okay, let me see here. A subject that's hot is, and this is what is chaos? You hear about constructive chaos, destructive. So I pose it because I enter everything as a mystery. We think we know it, but we don't. Who has seen chaos or the new? Are they only fancies of time? This war we're in, or any crime, a happening out of the blue, is design nothing but a blip, one frame in a film that flutters, light from a sparkler that sputters, a wave underneath a dark slip. Chaos can be seen as a boil, sticky mud covering the chest, the betrayal of the loyal, whatever keeps jumbling the crest. But who's to say it's nothing but what can never be figured out? Even chances get in a rut. Cloud of unknowing roams the route. Now, what's interesting about cloud of unknowing, it's a mystical term, philosophically mystical. It's just not hocus pocus. And it's that there's something outside of nature itself, outside of transcendent, that governs all. And this whole thing of what we know about chance now, it also goes into ruts. So after the fact, we realize that, wait, maybe it wasn't chance, and that's what I'm getting into. Who has seen chaos or the new? We think it's chaotic, but is it?
Right.
Maybe
just because we can't necessarily see the design or the plan ourselves from our perspective.
Exactly.
There is probably a better plan. And,
that's right.
And the intersections and connections that we form, network,
that's right.
They're maybe predetermined. I don't know.
That's right.
It's definitely food for thought. Food
Yeah.
for thought. So you're not just a poet; you're also a philosopher. You seem very.
I don't
attractive.
think how you can avoid it as a poet,
True.
but you can be the philosopher of the everyday.
Yeah.
As many poets are, they make that choice not to be a poet of a formulaic poet. They want to see the different things that transpire in the everyday.
Well, thank you, Bill. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and we're so glad that you could join us and tell us about your work with the